Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining the second Youth Connect live event, Building an Inclusive Climate Future. My name is Monamita Nagchowdhury and I am the British Council Climate Programme Lead and I'm based in London. Over to my co-chair.
Thank you, Mono. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Bom dia in my mother language. That means good morning. I am Amanda. I'm from Brazil. And I'm really excited to be a co host with Mono today. I have engaged with British Council since 2 years ago. And since then, we have been working together to understand how can we empower the young voice to be the leaders not just of tomorrow, but also of today. So this event will be amazing. I hope that you guys stay with us until the end and let's begin.
Brilliant. And please do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box by writing your name and where you're from. We're really excited to find out more about who's joining us for the next hour and a half. So to start, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about the British Council, our climate change work, Youth Connect and Youth Connect Live. So at the British Council, our aim is to build connections, understanding and trust between people in the UK and other countries. And central to this mission is education. We enable public dialogues on topics important to everyone, such as this. And we bring together stakeholders from different areas and strengthen the voices of young people so that young people are at the forefront of important dialogues. Now, Youth Connect Live is part of the Youth Connect program, and it's a series of online live sessions for young people all around the world. And it's really there to develop skills so that you can find out more about yourselves, connect with your communities and the wider world. Now, we've developed some amazing climate-focused projects and programs as part of Youth Connect, and we'll be telling you more about those later on in the session. Now, through our climate connection approach, we have worked with strategic partners and young people to advocate for the role of education, arts and culture in addressing climate change. And we've been doing that since COP was hosted in Glasgow in 2021. So COP is the United Nations annual climate change conferences. They're held in different countries every year. So this year it's going to be in Azerbaijan, in Baku, and next year it will be in Belém in Brazil. We've also just launched our exciting climate change strategy, and that really highlights the importance of working with young people and future climate leaders. And I'd just like to really say that we're delighted to be joined by a host of climate leaders for this global conversation on inclusion and climate action.
Perfect, Mono. And guys, we know that we are faced the worst environmental challenge in our generation. And we know as young people that we will be the most impacted. So we need to be in the communication space, but also in the decision make space. In the session today, we will hear people who are making the change. We want to understand how can we foster inclusive practice and the transition to greener economies, and how can we ensure young people benefit from the green transition. We know that we need to be in the front line. So let's hear a little bit with people who are in this space and how can we learn with them. Um, I During the session, we also offer you a chance to contribute in a campaign that will be showcased at COP29 and COP30 in my country. Please let me know here in the chat if you want to come to Brazil, if you want to participate in this kind of discussions, because it will be really important to understand how can young people be more be more present in this kind of space. And I have a question for you. what skills do young people need to be part of a just transition? Please think, reflect, and write on the chat because this is the goal of our conversation today. I repeat, what skills do young people need to be part of a just transition? Um, in this session, in this panel, we will hear from a gender perspective, and we want to capture voice from all of the world. I saw here in the chat that we have a lot of countries represented, so I think it'll be amazing. And for today, we'll hear people from Mexico, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Azerbaijan, and Ireland. In 15 days, I will travel to Azerbaijan. It will be 2 days of the trip because it's very far away from my country. So I think this space is amazing to have this global perspective and understand how can we work together, how can we build partnerships, how can we build this youth network to be more powerful in this kind of space. Mono, back to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So we've got a very exciting session ahead with a very important question that Amanda presented. Before we go any further, though, I need to just go over a few housekeeping points. So this session will be recorded and a video will be available on the British Council website afterwards. If you are on social media, please talk about the session today. And we're using 3 hashtags. So hashtag Youth Connect, hashtag Youth Connect Live, and hashtag Climate Connection. Now, there are closed caption subtitles in many languages available to you. And so you'll be able to read what the speakers are saying. Closed captions can be turned on in the More section of the toolbar. These are computer generated, so apologies if there are any mistakes. You are invited, as Amanda said, to use the chat box to make comments throughout the event and to direct questions to the panelists. But please note that your questions won't be answered in the chat, but there will be an opportunity for the panel to respond to selected questions. The chat box will be moderated, so please be reminded of the code of conduct that you signed up to when you registered. If you have any safeguarding concerns during the event, please email youthconnect.britishcouncil.org. Just a reminder as well of the content of the code of conduct. It outlined that we want this space to be a space for discussion and dialogue where we need to respect each other, even if our opinions are different. So the chat is open. Please do not share any personal contact details in there. If you do, your comments will be deleted. So please be respectful in the chat, otherwise the team will need to close it. But I'm sure this is a brilliant, brilliant online community for this session. So very excited. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Mono. And guys, it's a conversation, so please speak with us, share your reflections on the chat, but please be respectful. Let's think that everybody here, we are friends, but we need to understand that we have different cultures, so we need to understand how to share our ideas. And for our format for today, we'll hear from 3 panelists, Carmen, Elil, and Seruni, who will discuss what building an inclusive climate futures means to them. And then we'll hear from our global youth climate connection researchers, Shrikant, Previosa, and Horan. I'm sorry, Ron. My Portuguese accent until the end of the session, I will learn how to speak your name. I promise. They will speak about our new campaign advocating for holistic climate education. So, first of all, today we are really honored to have 3 panelists who will bring different perspectives and experience for today's conversation. Thank you all for the panel, for sharing your time and your experience for today. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, Carmen Villa Chavez, director of the Mexican nonprofit Liking Lab, which is currently one of the local partners on the British Council program Climate Skills. Second, Elil Hoole, PhD candidate, University of Cambridge. Elil was awarded a British Council Fellowship to an international research program on community-led climate resilience, which is being conducted in partnership with Cambridge University. Really fancy. And third, the Seruni Salsabila, COP29 coordinator for Young. Since the COP26, British Council has been in partnership with Young, who are the United Nations official children and youth constituent to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. First of all, I'd like to invite Carmen to come to the floor. And I have one question for you, Carmen, to start our conversation. How can we gender-responsive climate policy ensure that voice of women and marginalized gender groups are not only heard, but are central to driving effective climate action? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Mono, for this welcome. As you mentioned, Amanda, I'm from Mexico. I'm from the south part of Mexico, and I founded this organization that now is partnering with the British Council to implement a very ambitious and great program, the Climate Skills Program for Youth in the south of Mexico. And I would like to address the question you posed by presenting a couple of ideas of what we've been working through our 10 years of work in Mexico, especially a focus on civic engagement, advocacy, and how people can influence and actively participate in the decisions that the governments make. And one of the first ideas that I want to present that maybe for some of you may be pretty obvious, but for some policymakers, these things are not that obvious. So I think we need to name them and present them in every forum we speak about climate change, is that the intersection of gender, class, and race in climate vulnerability has a very important role on who needs to be talking about climate change, because the impacts of climate change disproportionately affects women and marginalized communities. We're talking about displacement, food insecurity, and health risk that because of these groups, pre-existing social and economic disparities impact in a greater way to these specific groups. So for understanding this idea of how the climate change is impacting heavily women and other marginalized groups, we see political participation as a path to equitable climate action. And that's how we understand that the importance of the voices from these communities that have to be in the climate policy discussions, and that we should prioritize inclusivity by enabling, that's the key thing, enabling these groups to take part in the decision-making bodies. And one of the challenges we see when we're talking about seeing women and other people from other historically marginalized groups in decision-making bodies is that not necessarily the women and other people that have access to these decision-making bodies necessarily bring with them a feminist perspective in order to implement this feminist perspective in climate policy. So when we're talking about feminist perspective, what is it that we're saying? We're saying that we need to prioritize community needs. We need to uphold social justice and addressing power imbalances. And when we talk about feminist climate policies, we need to advocate for the redistribution of resources and the decision-making power, ensuring that women and these communities that we've been talking about have access to tools and resources necessary for resilience and adaptation. So what we see here is not just, we see two parts in one side, women and marginalized communities that have the tools and the resources to impact and influence the policy making about climate, but also policies that allows and facilitates this interaction and this participation of these groups in climate policy. Another thing that we consider relevant in order to really bring the voices from women and marginalized groups to the discussion is recognizing class and race dimensions in policy impact. We cannot separate climate change from economic and racial inequalities that communities have to face in their everyday lives. So economic and racial inequalities must be factored into climate policy to ensure that solutions do not exacerbate existing disparities. And women, I'm bringing here to you a little example of the community of El Bosque in Tabasco. This is the south part of Mexico in Latin America that have succeeded in bringing attention of international authorities, specifically to the International Court of Human Rights. And they are the first recognized community of climate displaced people in Latin America. So these people, especially women of this community, organize in order to visualize the terrible impacts that climate change have had in their community at the point that the community has gone because of the rises of the sea level in that part of Mexico. What are then some recommendations that we have witnessed and we have proposed in order to have gender responsive climate policies? We really, our bet is to really have inclusion mechanisms like quotas to ensure sustained and meaningful representation of women and marginalized groups in climate leadership roles. We can see that at the global level, there's still an important gap of the number of decision makers and public authorities roles that are not equal for women and men. In Mexico, we have laws that have, during the last years, create a political system where women and men are 50% of the public roles are occupied by men and women in this at the same level. This is not necessarily the final response in order to create gender responsive climate policies, but it is an important step in order to create equality for decision making and participation in public policy for women and other marginalized groups. Also, another bet that we in which we believe is gender budgeting in climate finance. What that means that when we are allocated resources to work on climate change issues, we make sure that we are allocating resources for women-led projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carmen, for those really important insights. I'd like to now invite Elil to come on screen. And there's a very important question for Elil to respond to, which is, why are innovations in climate repair important for vulnerable communities at the forefront of climate impacts?
Thank you so much, Mono, and thank you everyone for being here to hear me speak and also for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about my research and why this is such an important question. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to contextualize my presentation with these two maps, which some of you may have already seen. It was published by the IPCC last year. And it really does show that even if we are to limit global warming at 1.5, there are many parts of the world that would still see such drastic changes in the environment around them that our everyday life will be changed. And this does particularly impact things like food production, human survivability, people who work outdoors or live outdoors. And we see those are issues that really primarily impact communities that are developing the most because of the lack of economic and environmental safeguard measures that exist in developing countries. So it's really important now to consider, are we really on track for 1.5, first of all? And if we're not, does this map change? Does it become even more difficult for people to exist in the world that will emerge? Next slide, please. Thank you. And which is why we think about, what does climate repair mean? Are we at a stage in our planet's trajectory where we need to think about, can we reverse climate change? Is it enough to stop pollution now that we cap ourselves at 1.5? As the maps previously showed, that it's actually probably not enough to say that if we stop emitting today, if we stop climate change at 1.5, we'll be able to protect life around the world. When at 1.5, there'll be many communities that are still drastically affected. So we think about climate repair, which is really restoring environmental systems where the impacts of climate change have changed these systems to the extent that Earth's natural capacities can no longer regulate or restore the natural systems that these functions serve to regulate. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so because of my mic, so I have to keep saying next slide. We do see that countries around the world are already adopting repair solutions. Now, we have to know that these solutions do not appear in international code. There's no international mechanism for regulating what it means to repair or reverse climate change. In international regulations, we only have adaptation, which is how do communities adjust their behaviors and their living ways to these new changes that climate change brings about, and mitigation. Mitigation is to try to stop future climate change by reducing pollution and so on. However, repair is a third concept that doesn't enter international accord, but we see countries and communities around the world are adopting it. Now we see in China and Peru, people have taken measures to reduce surface albedo in Peru by painting rocks white. And what that does is reflect sunlight back into the atmosphere, reducing how hot that area gets. Now, these white rocks, what they do is they mimic glaciers that were there before, but they've melted and disappeared. In China, because they have a bit more advanced technology, they use drones to refreeze mountaintops and restore these glaciers that are otherwise melting. In Indonesia, we see, excuse me, in Indonesia, we see that the same type of technology, which is drones or cloud seeding technology, used to address wildfires, to reduce the amount of flash flooding that occurs. And in countries like Sri Lanka, where I'm from, and Thailand, the same technology is used to improve rainfall to ensure that agricultural harvesting, agricultural functions can continue. Now, these solutions occur at the global level, and the only solution that scientists currently think about is solar radiation management. At a regional level, where you have international corporations, such as between Thailand and Sri Lanka, and at the local level, which could be at the micro level, which my PhD research looked at how women farmers particularly try to repair the environmental damages that occur on their farm to ensure that their farms can continue to produce food. Next slide, please. My PhD research also developed this theoretical understanding of how we can understand why do women farmers, for example, women farmers in the dry zone of Sri Lanka, get left behind in developmental interventions. Agriculture is a huge sector in Sri Lanka, and there have been policy and technology interventions since as early as 1960, actually even before, during colonial period, to try to improve the amount of food that is produced to ensure national self-sufficiency when it comes to food production. That self-sufficiency means we produce enough food to feed our population. So when you look at developmental interventions, you see that there are really three main axes of how development occurs. One is we change the policy to make sure that we have the right governmental resources and let's say strategy to make sure that development occurs in the right pathway. We also look at market or economic development, where we try to increase jobs, we try to increase GDP, and other economic factors to ensure that each individual that's part of this system is able to live a good life. And finally, we see technology development, which is where in there are priority sectors. For example, in agriculture, you may introduce a tractor or you may introduce fertilizers. And these are technologies that allow individuals to improve their outcomes within that sector. You'll notice at the bottom, I use the word institutions. And I want to differentiate from an economics perspective the difference between institutions and organizations. Organizations are your government bodies. Your Department of Health, for example, is an organization in economic language. But institutions goes beyond that. It also looks at things that Carmen mentioned, which is race, gender, and other forms of other forms of social practices that might introduce inequalities within populations. And these institutions also determine who has access to these developmental interventions. So some people may may benefit from a policy intervention more than others. And these things that differentiate who gets the best interventions are described in institutions. Next slide, please. So as part of my fellowship, which was 6 months, the first 3 months I used for advocacy, and the last 3 months I did a little bit of research just to sort of test some of the things that I was finding from my PhD. And the first thing I wanted to look at that came out of my PhD, which started off as looking at how are women adapting to climate change. And then what I got out of it was it's not only adaptation, but they're actually reversing climate change on their farms. So I wanted to consider, if women farmers are reversing climate change on their farm, where should they get the best support to do this? And so my research while I was with the British Council's Climate Connection Fellowship was to have a little focus group discussion with a few farmers and technical specialists who are in the dry zone of Sri Lanka to ask, if climate change is happening in and around you and it's affecting your food production, how would you like to get support to reverse it and continue doing the practices that you're already doing in agriculture? The results I got from these discussions were a little bit mixed because, first of all, I think the first thing that was affecting the results was that the term for climate change, the technical knowledge around it, wasn't quite widespread at that level. So farmers are understanding climate change because of their experiential knowledge and seeing the environment around them change, but the strategies to address it, to adapt, to mitigate, were not something that was in their technical consciousness. So there was clearly the level at which I was researching, which is the micro level, which I thought was the most interesting because of how rich farmers' knowledge is, may not be the best level to do this research. So next slide, please. The question then becomes, what is the best level to do this research? So during my fellowship also, I looked at some other literature that had recently been published around, what's going on with climate change and development. And the biggest thing I found during my fellowship is that it's a priority for developing countries because there is such a critical need to reverse climate change because the impacts of climate change are so severe. The number of people who die every year from the impacts of climate change in developing countries is far too excessive in anyone's opinion, of course. And the amount of economic loss as well. Excuse me, economic losses in the billions for developing countries. So how do developing countries afford this? It's clearly a case of injustice. There is this technology that's being developed, but if you look at some of the common factors in the previous slide where we looked at what these technologies are, we see that they're all middle income or high income countries that are able to adopt the best technologies. So again, we're talking about funding, we're talking about race, we're talking about ethnicity, we're talking about a number of institutional factors that affect how people are able to access these critical life-saving, environmental restoring services. So then we look at the literature again, and we see that in the global South, youth and policymakers who experience the worst impacts of climate change have the greatest preference for repairing the climate as well. On the other hand, we have this other power imbalance, which is that at the level of UNFCCC or where climate accord is being developed, it's driven by the West, which it is an inclusive process, but we have to acknowledge that there are power imbalances in how these inclusive processes how inclusive these processes can actually be. So consequently, we do see that issues of climate repair are not even funded for developing countries. We can only access funding for adaptation and mitigation through the UNFCCC. There is a clear case to be made for why funding these technologies is necessary for equality and human welfare, but there is I wouldn't say no research, I would say there's insufficient research and insufficient advocacy at that high policy level to introduce new funding mechanisms. And these processes take forever, as we see with the Loss and Damage Fund. That took 5 or 7 years to materialize from its early conception to an actual fund, and that process is still being played out. We'll have to see how that turns out as well, but there is scope for it, but it takes a lot of advocacy, it takes a lot of data, it takes a lot of pressure from developing country governments to make that change occur. Next slide, please. So looking back at the question, why is it important for this technology to be developed? And more importantly, why is it important that this technology is developed in an inclusive manner? Well, what I'd like to research next, if I get a postdoc, et cetera, is to really understand where do these preferences come from? Who can we quantify and say who would really like to see a fund like this emerge out of the UNFCCC, for example, or out of other OECD country funding for development? There are many pathways to fund it in an equitable manner. We need to talk about how is technology dispersed. And again, if we can really prove that there is interest from the global south to develop this type of technology and finance it equitably, that might be really impactful. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. And I hope it also kind of makes clear why it's really important that this technology is not developed and hoarded by people who can afford it, but rather that countries that are most impacted by climate change have an equal seating at the pace of which this technology is developed and deployed. Thank you so much. That is the end of my presentation, and I hope I didn't go over time.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Ellie. Your presentation was amazing. It's really inspiring. I could spend hours and hours listening to you because, oh my gosh, girl, you rock. For our next participant, I'd like to invite Seruni Salsabila from Yungu. And Serene, I have a special question for you. In your opinion, how can inclusive climate policies ensure that marginalized communities, particularly women, are empowered to actively participate in building resilient, sustainable economies? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Amanda. Okay, let me try to check if I'm okay. So hello, everyone. So today's, there will be perhaps 3 things that I would like to share. Before, and thank you so much for the opportunity. So how can inclusive climate policies can ensure that the inclusivity of marginalized community, especially women, it can be empowered, and in the future, it actually able to build a resilient and sustainable economy in a country. So perhaps I would like to highlight again what is the importance of inclusive climate policy, marginalized community, and how it can build a resilient and sustainable community. But before that, I want everyone to imagine, this is connecting to the project we are working now in ASEAN. I want you to imagine a life built on what others throw away, with no knowledge of the health risks or the potential value that exists in that waste. And this is the reality of thousands of women waste pickers across ASEAN, who are often left behind by a world focused on rapid progress. These women are among the many in our region, especially in my country, Indonesia, who live on the margins of society impacted by the climate change and the human activities, but they are seldom included in the solutions. So, inclusive climate policy. It is essential to ensure that the benefits of sustainable practices are accessible to all. So this is the importance of climate policies. Perhaps it is in the format of regulations it is in the format of a target on the NDC, and specifically in ways perhaps we would like to highlight in the sustainable, responsible consumption and productions. So in the countries of Southeast Asia and stands as ASEAN, right now my project is focusing on this specific waste management. So the importance of inclusive climate policy, it connects to how a country will tackle these specific issues, and the importance of equity, connecting to all multi-layers of community, including the stakeholders as well. And then with these inclusive policies as a foundation, we are actively empowering marginalized community to make climate resilience as a reality. So perhaps why focus on women? So women, especially in marginalized group, they play a big role in their communities. Perhaps in some traditional values, they are caregivers, agricultural workers, and stewards of natural resources, I would say. So that is why their deep connections with the natures and their surrounding is important to make the woman to feel empowered, especially making them as the power of change in their community. And one example of our work, the organization is Catalyst of Change ASEAN under the ASEAN Youth Community for Household Hazardous Waste. And our example work is community-led waste management, and we are a grassroots projects. We have empowered over 500 youth about several youth skills, and then we are transforming waste into opportunity in our first project in Indonesia. Fun fact, they're waste workers, but we found based on the pre-program assessment, almost 70% didn't know about waste management or the 3R principle, which is the reuse, reduce, recycle. And our solution is to equip this community trying to turn waste into valuable products such as eco-enzymes, soaps from leftover cooking oil, and upcycled plastic to a product, which by the end, we hope that they can improve their economic status as well. We are trying to expand the COC, Catalyst of Change Indonesia, to be implemented future in perhaps Philippines, Thailand, and Myanmar. So this model is designed to promote a long-term resilience and economic stability by embedding circular economy, and hopefully this should be embedded again through the climate policy, which as a youth, we can bring a policy recommendations. So lastly, youth call to action, because this is what I would like to hope in all youth, is to achieve a truly sustainable economy. We just need the just transitions, one that include everyone, especially marginalized community. And as youth, we are not only witnessing these changes, but also leading them. So I urge young people, especially at the grassroots level, observe, find the solutions to every challenges, equip ourselves with knowledge, lead yourself before lead everything, and to advocate for policies that are both inclusive and gender responsive. So perhaps highlighting what a slogan from my organizations, we are not just addressing waste, and in the right side, you see a policy recommendations, which is a collective input from the Southeast Asia Youth in the AOACHW Symposium 2023. We are driving a green job transition, not only addressing waste, ensuring that on the implementation of sustainable development goals, no communities are being left behind, creating a future where no one is overlooked and sustainable livelihoods are possible for all. And perhaps as a closing, so let's try together turning challenges into sustainable solutions, like how our organization turning waste into value. And youth lead the change. Be aware, be responsible, being sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Serene. It's amazing. It's amazing how young people, when they are leading, how can we make the change? It's great. Thank you for your presentation. Now I have a special question for everybody, and I have a mission for you. You need to answer in 1 minute. You have exactly 1 minute to answer the question. The question is, as we hit into COP29, what is one key thing you'd like to see prioritized to make sure climate action really benefits marginalized communities? I will ask you to Carmen, and then Ellie and Seruni. And please, 1 minute. And also, guys, it's a conversation. So please, everyone who are here in this room, share your reflections in the chat. You can also share the answer for this question on the chat. Let's keep talking, and if you have more questions, please write on the chat that we can see what you can do. Okay, please, Carmen, you have 1 minute. Go ahead, girl.
Well, I will say, if there's one thing I would like to see prioritized for COP29 would be the voices of these communities and women and youth. And as Seruni was presenting, the voices of the people who are living the impacts of they have the lived experience of how climate change are impacting their territories. But also, another thing that I would like to see is empowered voices, documented voices, informed voices of these youth, and that can present the lived experience of how they're dealing with climate change in their communities, but also the solutions they're finding, the data they're collecting. I would say that.
Thank you so much. Ellie, please, you have the floor. Go ahead. 1 minute.
Thank you. I think for me, the biggest concern or priority that I would like to highlight would be to say that 1.5 is not enough. That for so long we've been believing that 1.5 would be enough to save us from like impending doom. But the last 5 IPCC reports have warned that 1.5 might also have severe impacts in the developing world, more so than the developed world. So from a developing country perspective, I think I would like to emphasize that policymakers should say that, you know, we don't want to stay at 1.5. We'd like to go back down, go back to like a reasonable level where all life, not just human, but also animals and plants can all survive. So I think for me, that would be the one thing that I would really love to see emphasized at COP.
Thank you so much. 1.5 is not enough. Perfect. Serene, please, you have the floor. And guys who are here in the chat, please write on the chat what you could see, what you would like to see, what you would like to prioritize. And Serene, 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, perhaps continuing from what Ella just mentioned about the IPCC report, perhaps one thing I would like to know, as there is one thematic about the new collective quantified goals, basically discussing about climate finance. So it's important to make sure the traceability, accountability, and the pledges of countries itself and non-state parties to make sure that the localized climate finance also directed to the global south and the participations of marginalized community. Perhaps this is one thing that I would really look forward to heading to the COP30 as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, girls, who to share this thought. I'm pretty sure if you girls be on the decision make space, be like in the space that people who do not want to solve the problem, climate crisis will be on the past. We also have a little bit of time, so I'd love to make one more question, but please, 1 minute. The question is, how could youth-led research support your work and help build an inclusive climate future? Carmen would like to start.
Yeah, an idea that I tried to elaborate in the previous question. How can we inform and empower these communities that are dealing with climate change impact by research and data that can create this space of interaction and dialogue with policy makers and decision makers. So I think it's crucial to document and to research and to bring science and methodology, like scientific methodology, to the lived experience of communities in order to have a common language with decision makers.
Thank you so much. Ellie, would you like to go next?
Well, I think the most exciting thing about research is that you get to look at things that you're passionate about, things that affect you. And if youth around the world are experiencing climate change in a way that doesn't match what policymakers are talking about, if policymakers are saying, hey, we're hitting 1.5, they're all fine and dandy, but in the world around you, you see that it's not fine and dandy. I would think that researching those aspects of life which are affecting you the most would bring the most richest information to how these policies are formulated. And particularly looking at how are people in, for example, the women that I worked with during my PhD, they wouldn't use the word climate repair, but on their farms, they have these lush environments that they're creating. They're reversing the impacts of climate change just on their farm. Maybe look into how the communities around you are unconsciously reversing climate change and use that as examples to suggest that policymakers might have more effective funding if they can give you technical assistance funding and development around those technologies that you're already using.
Thank you, Ali. Serene, would like to.
Yeah. Perhaps I would like to try to use the imaginations how there's like sentence focus on the presence and how presence is important. So I would like to see youth as the presence. They are in the presence and having seeing what happened in terms of climate and actually leading the future itself, especially for future generations. Perhaps I would like to highlight on that. And youth are the leaders in several projects, setting baselines, including in research, empowering generations, and also youth are the one that witness everything. So perhaps including these points would be something I would like to highlight in answering this. Thank you.
That's perfect. Oh my gosh, I am really happy with this panel, with this answer. I am looking right now for the future leaders of this world. Thank you so much for being with us, girls. I hope to see you one day, one time, face to face, because I was really inspired by your job. So thank you so much. Now I will give you the floor to Mono. She will introduce our next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda and Carmen and Elil and Seruni, for some very important, pertinent points. And, you know, Conference of Youth and COP is very soon. I think it's starting on the 9th and the 11th as well. So really important points to think about. So this is really exciting, this next section. This is all about us launching our new research campaign, which is youth-led. And we are going to hear from 3 members of our Global Youth Climate Connection research team. So that's Shika, Firuza, and Ruan. And they're going to tell us more about the importance of this campaign being youth-led. And we've already heard from our 3 panelists about how important this is. Before we go to them, we have got a short video.
I believe in organization of young people because we have the spirit of change.
If we don't do anything and don't make an impact, we'll never solve it.
That is why it is so much important for young people to be involved in decisions making about environmental issues.
If we don't involve, who's gonna be?
Great. So thank you for sharing that. So as you can see from that video, through our climate connection approach, we were able to bring in the lead up to COP26 8,000 young people who responded to the Global Youth Letter, but also 23,000 people, young people from 87 countries who also added their voice. And this was really important because we've been hearing today how important it is to get diverse voices into the conversation, but also to inform and influence policy. And that creative collective statement in the lead up to COP26 really helped inform the decision and the debate. Now, at the British Council, it's really important as part of our youth programming to look at learning and sharing knowledge and opportunities for this to be presented in global climate action as part of platforms such as COP and COI. So COP being the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And also we've heard about Youngo and Seruni being part of that organization, who have the Conference of Youth every year and through consultation present the Global Youth Statement. So we've listened to those voices from COP26, and now we feel working with a very exciting new youth network that we want to refocus some of that research and think about the skills that are needed for a just transition into a more inclusive, sustainable future. So this new campaign builds on the work from before, and to design it, we brought together, as I've said, this global youth network. It includes participants from countries such as Brazil, Vietnam, Pakistan, Sudan, as well as many others. And as you've seen, we're going to hear more about the Hive, and we really, really want to get you involved. So I'm just going to introduce our three young researchers from that network. I can see Ruan's there already, and we've got Firuza, and I think we're going to get Shika there as well. So just to give you some introductions on these brilliant young people. Shika is a social impact professional based out of New Delhi, India. She is currently working as a senior project officer with Climate Group. We've got Firuza, who I'm very excited to be meeting at COP. She's a project manager based in Baku in Azerbaijan, and she's working at COP29 with Kronos Enterprise. And she's an alumna of the State Program of Azerbaijan with an MA from UCL in Education, Gender and International Development. And finally, Ruan, who is based in Meath, Ireland, and is currently working as a senior immigration analyst at Fragomen. He's an environmental campaigner and recently, very impressively, ran in the local elections in the Green Party in Ireland. So I think we definitely have the right people in this Global Youth Network. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Mona, and thank you, obrigada, as well, Amanda, for the warm welcome and introduction. It's great to present this with you all today, and what an opportunity to get to talk to many people from around the world. And so myself, Firuza and Shika, were presenting this campaign. As we know, COP29 is in full swing, but as they say, a lot work done, a lot more to do. We have this is a marathon, not a sprint, and so we have to keep planning and preparing to keep the fight up in terms of making sure that there's climate action and that it's inclusive. And so I'm very proud to welcome this today. Just to give you a brief introduction of why I got involved in kind of campaigning on climate action. I saw across Europe there was the Green Wave, the climate protests led by students and young people, where on Fridays, young students and young people left the classroom and said, no, enough is enough, and took action and took to the streets. And it led this huge green wave across Europe and around the world. And that greatly inspired me to really take action. So I'm very proud that we have to keep up this momentum. We have to keep up the work. And so I'm very proud to see British Council taking action on that. So To delve into more about what this campaign is, and I'll move on to the next slide. We have seen that with COP26 that there has been a lot of good work done, but far more needs to be done in terms of ensuring that it is an inclusive transition to ensure that vulnerable people in very marginalized groups and also in vulnerable heat spots are making sure that we have attention. And as we know, climate change, it doesn't listen to borders, or it doesn't listen to our national boundaries, as we've seen recently, sadly, with the floods in Spain. It's now hitting the global north heavily as well. And I think this should be a wake-up call that we should be paying attention far more to the vulnerable spots in the countries that we've noted, such as Vietnam and Brazil. And particularly with young people. As we've mentioned, the British Council have done a survey on 8,000 young people about what we can see, how are they experiencing climate. Sadly, though, 67% feel that their leaders are not listening, and 75% do have the skills. They feel like they have the capacity to take action on climate change, but aren't given the opportunity to take action on that. Particularly, as we've mentioned before, the previous presenters, they've noted that women and minority groups are simply not listened to. In our group currently, in our research group, I was speaking to a young woman from Sudan who feels she has the skills to take action on climate change in her community. However, because of conflict and because of inaction due to not only local but international leaders, she's unable to bring about the change she needs in her area. And so this is why it's so important that we listen to these groups of people. So I thought, let's see, I want to ask everyone here, how do you feel? Do you feel you have the skills to take on climate change? And these skills can be very different. It can be very technical, say with your knowledge on agriculture, on sustainable farming, or it can be knowledge on battery installation, or even can it be communication? Are you a good campaigner? Can you talk to people and bring people together? These are all important skills in climate. And see, let's just see what you guys respond with in terms of climate skills. Because as we can see from the previous poll, many do feel that they have the skills, but they don't have the opportunity. But what do you guys feel? I note that sometimes like we are asked what is a climate skill, and it can be so kind of vague and out in the air. But even a young girl, Greta Thunberg, who just left school, and you could say that even if I left school, what skills would I have? And yet she can change a continent, and so we have way more skills than we might think we might have. And as you can see here, a 2/3 majority, wow, stop the count, as they say. That's resounding. And many people feel that they somehow have skills, and some people may feel that they don't have skills. But what's so important is we hear that, and that we are listening to this perspective. And this is only a poll of around 100 people, 50 people. And so we can definitely feel that there's more to be heard. To give British Council a huge credit, they've had some groundbreaking programs that have really helped people in small areas, in areas such as Brazil, Mexico, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam, with their programs to help upskill young people, particularly young women, in terms of ensuring that they're not only they can take on green jobs, but also the fact that they are more adaptable and they're less susceptible to climate shocks. And this is so important, as we've noted earlier, about is 1.5 degrees, is that not ambitious enough? And sadly, there may be even more crises, but if we're more sustainable, we can improve, we can become more resilient to these climate shocks, and they can help educate others in these areas as well. And so, as I've mentioned before, British Council, in this project that we're leading in this campaign, we're planning ahead for the future, and not only for the next COP, but also into 2026, to make sure that we are locally asking people, seeing into their daily lives what they're doing in terms of their living standards or their cost of living, to really see, because most people, they don't have the time to actually think into the future. Financial reasons, or say drought or famine or a huge climate shock, it really narrows your time scale to think in the week or in the day. It doesn't allow you to think very far into the future. And climate change, as we know, is a long-term but very immediate issue. And so with the British Council and in this campaign, we're hoping to really listen to people that may not necessarily have that large timescale, that may be in those vulnerable areas in, say, deltas in Vietnam, where they're vulnerable to climate shocks and stuff like that. And so I think it's vital that we listen and zone in to these not only hard skills with upskilling in tech, and agri and sustainable farming, but also soft skills that are vital, such as education and mediation and communication, because we can only work together and bring people together, and also cultural skills as well, to understand the cultural background where people might have, to find the best solutions in this area. I will now, I'm very proud to welcome on Firuza, who will delve more into detail about what our campaign will be and what we mean about young people and an inclusive climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruan. Thank you for presenting. So I would like to give you a little bit of information about the campaign. So as you know, as a part of COP29, we are building the Climate Connection Hive campaign. So what is this? This Hive campaign is a global youth-led initiative focused on a holistic approach to climate education to enable us to build an inclusive transition. So now, why do we advocate for a more holistic approach here? It's because traditional climate education, it mostly often focuses heavily on facts and figures and mostly technical skills, but it always, most of the time actually, it overlooks the importance of soft skills such as collaboration or empathy, adaptability, or such really important soft skills, which we will need to build a foundation for tackling complex and interconnected issues, such as climate change. And without these soft skills, it is much harder to engage people and create lasting change. And by linking youth across the globe, we are encouraging collaboration that crosses culture, perspectives, and experiences. When all these young people unite, they bring up fresh and innovative ideas all together, so that not one single viewpoint can achieve alone. And I would like to change the next slide. So as a part of Climate Connection Hive campaign, we envision each and every single one of young person as a pollinator of change. Which this is the idea that is inspired by the bees, like the natural pollinators that move from one flower to another and spreading pollen and helping entire ecosystem flourish. And in the same way, we see youth as essential carriers of knowledge and ideas and all those creative solutions, and transferring all these across sectors and communities and even regions. So they use the term that we use, pollinator. It is such a powerful symbolism. So because just as bees, they cross-pollinate and helping to sustain diverse ecosystem use today, we also have the ability to transfer all this knowledge across the boundaries and fostering the connected global network. But of course, it's not just symbolic. It's also all about the action. Like, the pollinators, they are vital for the ecosystem health. So without them, many plants and the animals, they couldn't survive. Similarly, youth play an essential action-oriented role in building a resilient and informed society. And okay, and here I would like to ask all of you guys a question. But do you believe that you are a pollinator of change in your community? I would really love to hear your perspective. I would really like to know what you think, how you see yourself in this regard. Oh, wow. Well, actually, that's pretty impressive. And I'm so proud of all of you. It's really amazing to see all of you, knowing that you all see yourself like that, and it starts from here, I believe. So I would like to, so you can see this picture there, and I'm gonna tell you what we mean by that. So we are building a climate connection journey. So you can see ground, grow, discover, and sustain. So first, we start with ground. So imagine a plant or a tree that firmly rooted in the earth. This stage, it's all about the acknowledging who we are and the cultures that we belong to. It's all about building confidence and self-awareness, understanding our roots, understanding ourselves so we can all grow together. Then grow. So think it as our ecosystem, how diverse it is, how interconnected it is. So this is a stage about like learning from each other's differences and valuing all of those differences. And it's all about the communication and the climate literacy, which will let us to connect and work together very effectively across all these boundaries. And discovering, you can see that like all these bees, they're looking for the flowers to pollinate. So this is where we research unheard stories in the climate space, identifying the systems and the opportunities that may have been overlooked. It's all about the exploration. It's all about the curiosity and uncovering insights that can guide our actions. And the last one is sustain. Finally, like we sustain like bees across pollinating to foster growth across the ecosystem. In this stage, in this last stage, we are campaigning to uplift unheard voices and strengthen cultural connections for sustainable change. So this is all about having a purpose. This is all about using a public narrative and storytelling and of course action to inspire others and driving meaningful impact. Here I would like to tell you that like at Youth Connect Live and COP29, we are actively utilizing youth consultation to shape our campaign. So looking ahead, of course, we will have a comprehensive global campaign and in-depth research activities that will be like scheduled from December 2024 through summer 2025. Finally, the findings and all the calls of our campaign will be shared at COP30 in Brazil, in Belém, and scheduled for November 2025. And I believe this will be such an exciting opportunity to showcase the impact of our work and the power of youth engagement in climate action. So we have been talking about like holistic approach. We've been talking about not transition, but inclusive transition. So I would like to talk a bit more about that. As we work towards just green transition, one of our primary focuses here is ensuring that this transition is truly inclusive. So what does that even mean? It means that opening opportunities for those who are most affected by climate change, and especially marginalized communities who often bear the greatest burdens, but have the fewest resources to adapt. These are the communities that experience the first and worst impacts of the climate change, and they must be central in our approach. But inclusion, of course, is not just about addressing the effects of the climate change. It is also about preparing people for the economic shifts that are coming. So these are the entire communities whose livelihoods, of course, depend on industries that might shut down or undergo fundamental changes in the green transition. So for the transition to be just, these communities must be supported as a priority. But how can we do this to make these support effective, how can we like support them to make it effective? We will need training and education to happen, where people these people are already are. So we meet these communities in their own spaces, breaking down their barriers to the participation and ensuring that they have the access to these knowledge and the skills required for this transition. And by doing that, I believe that we can foster a workforce that is ready and empowered to take part in green transition, regardless where they come from or what their previous industries might have been. And there's one more question, last one, I promise, that I would like to ask. Do you agree that inclusive transition is critical to leaving no one behind in a green future? So it would be lovely to hear your perspective, to see what you think. So I would love to see your answers. Oh, wow. Wow, it's 92%. That's really amazing to hear. And thank you so much, guys. And I will hand over the presentation to Shika. Shika, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Firuza. Hi, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Yes, okay. I'm just moving my slide. Yes, here we go. Thanks, Firuza. And the audience poll gave us a clear check on why clear indication on the need of inclusive and just transition. So when we speak about, just a second, I need to move my slide back. Yes, here it is. Okay, so what needs to be done in order to succeed in this climate journey? Not sure why the slides are moving, Julia, if you could help me with that and move back to the one that I had put it on stable. The next one, yes, this one, yeah. Thank you for holding this for me. Yes, so the audience poll gave us a clear indication for why there is a need for inclusive and just transition. But what needs to be done in order to succeed in this climate journey? The action needs to be youth-led, both inside and outside the negotiation rooms, right? And the youth perspective is critical in not just implementation, when it comes to implementation, but also it is important in taking a seat at high-level dialogues and in shaping climate policies that are both gender and youth responsive. And when we look at latest NDC report that has been released by the UNFCCC, it highlights that how about 60% NDCs mention about the vulnerable groups, including the young people, and we would certainly want that percentage to go up, right? And for that, we would need young voices, more young voices leading these discussions. And it could be possible if the young people have adequate skills, networks, platforms, and partnerships in order to drive this meaningful change. Yes. We definitely need more evidence in order to lead this action, and that could lead us to the youth, that led us to the Youth Climate Connect teams to collectively come together and frame, a research question around the skills which are needed for inclusive transition, which is also just throughout the engagement with youth, and also ensuring that vulnerable and marginalized youth groups and the voices which are unheard, they are included. And when we also speak about this, we need to ensure that there is a proper evidence to it, and that's how, looking ahead, we at the Global Youth Climate Connect research team came up with the question that what skills does the young people need in order to thrive in an inclusive and green economy. And this research will focus on the youth groups in 5 countries, which we'll be deep diving into. Those countries would be of Brazil, Mexico, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And the special target would be given to the sectors which are critical to climate action, for example, agriculture, energy, and manufacturing. Vulnerable groups, such as those from the rural areas or minority backgrounds, are integral in ensuring that the research supports a participatory approach and a truly inclusive transition. Um, but you must be wondering why only these three sectors are given a focus on, why only agriculture, why energy, and why just manufacturing sectors are given a priority over here. This is a question that we also collectively came through in our research group discussions, and we discussed collectively about how these sectors have a higher transition risk, so we could call them as high climate transition risk sectors, and those are mostly more fossil fuel dependent and require more of moving away from higher carbon emission context. And it's also important to consider that when we speak about this, within these sectors are the groups which are more vulnerable to climate change as compared to others. For example, when we speak about women who hardly get exposure or jobs in the renewable energy space. So in order to do a transition which is meaningful towards a greener economy, we need to ensure that it is done in a equitable and participatory fashion, so that the spaces which have been either closed or traditionally marginalized, we have an opportunity to open them up for all the genders and all groups for a meaningful engagement. And in order to make this research as inclusionary, inclusionary and participatory as possible, we tried our best to explore creative methodologies. For example, the one that you can see on your screen, like the futuristic thinking tools, hackathons, autophotographies, FGDs, which are the focus group discussions, in-depth interviews, etc. So we are trying to do a couple of these creative methodologies in our research. And the end objective, as I said, along with my other teammates, that we are committed to gathering diverse, unheard perspectives and building a comprehensive, understanding of the skills and support that the youth need. Moving on, you can see that this slide will take you through the broad research design, which alongside also mentioning about the target respondent groups and suggested methods that we envision using in our research. And we would want this research to be a global movement for identifying what green climate skills are needed. And for that, we would also love to hear from you about what you think about your opinion, your perspectives in this cause. And over here, we are going to share a QR code that you can see already on your screen. And we would love to invite you to join us in helping design the campaign by filling a questionnaire and share your views and become a part of the global, youth-led effort, which is towards building an inclusive and sustainable future. You may also see a link to reach to this form in the chat box. So either you can scan the QR code given here on the screen, or just feel free to paste it in your browser from the chat box. And we would love to hear your views, and we can keep aside a couple of minutes while you submit your views into this form. And please feel free to put it in the chat box in case you are facing any concerns with accessing this form, in case. It's a very short form. It has about 8-9 questions, and the objective is to understand what your perspective is from your lived experiences when we say about building an inclusive space towards a green transition.
Very well done, Shika. That was very well put. So yeah, please put in as much detail as we can into the form. We really look forward to hearing from all of you. As well, as I note, there are many attendees who are from Azerbaijan, so you must be very proud of hosting the COP29 summit. So I hope it goes well. As I know, many of our many countries around the world are sending delegations over, so it's a great moment to see this. But it's also, you think of it, we have our own COP summit here. We are the seeds of future plans, and we can only develop this further. So thank you. And thank you so much, Mono, again, and Amanda for hosting this great event. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. It was
thanks,
a
Mono.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think, Amanda, how long are we giving for completing this? Another minute or so? Just one more minute, everyone.
Thanks, Monisa, for again pasting the link to the form. In case you haven't done already, you can go to the form and submit your responses. It's a very quick, short form. And thanks again for your attention, and thanks Firuza and Ruan for taking our audience through our research so far. And thank you again to all the young change makers who have joined us in advancing your role in the youth-led climate action. Thanks again. Now I would like to hand it over back to Mono for the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, and really impressive presentation from all three of you. Thank you for your work. Very excited that this is just the start of the journey. Amanda, some closing remarks, I think.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all speakers and all participants. Oh my God, that was amazing. I was really impressed. First, because of our women speakers, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be friends of them. They want to be a Brazilian, want to have a Brazilian friend. It was amazing. And then this campaign, guys, oh my God, this is a brilliant work. And if you didn't have time to finish the questions, please keep the link open. And after our session, come back and fill up the form. All right.
Amanda, I was just thinking actually that although we've only got 6 minutes left, maybe we should just bring on our three panelists, bring in Elil and Carmen and Seruni, just if they could give a really quick response, actually, just maybe 3 words each to what you thought of the young people presenting the new youth-led research campaign. So perhaps we could go to Carmen and then Elil and Seruni.
3 words would be young women leading.
Okay, those were the 3 words. Fabulous. Well, we do need to acknowledge everyone there as well, but yes. Okay, Elil.
I'd love to say leadership, inspirational, and meaningful. I was going to say incredibly meaningful, but I think that goes over the word count. But yes, meaningful.
Meaningful. Thank you. And Seruni.
Perhaps resilience, connect, and hope.
Wonderful. What was the second one? Resilience?
Connect.
Ah, okay, brilliant. And hope. Well, I think that we are framing and supporting them, then we're on the right track. So really exciting to find out what happens, and can we get more than 32,000 voices who added their voice in COP26? I really, really hope so. Do promote it as much as possible. So we've got 5 minutes left. Amanda, any final reflections to you before I end?
Yeah, sure. When I was here at the girls, I wrote some bullet points that I would like to summarize to our audience. First, Carmen, she introduced the intersection of gender, race, and class, and she brought the feminist perspective in climate policy. We need to prioritize women who are the community leaders. We need to understand who are in the grassroots and how can we empower them. And then Ellie, she spoke about climate repair. And one question that she made, I was thinking, it was, can we reverse climate change? Here in my country, we have the Amazon rainforest, and we are almost in the turning point. If we keep deforestation, maybe we don't have a forest anymore. So this question was in my mind. And another thing is micro level, too small to address the repair. Would the result be different at the policymaker level? I am a climate activist. I am from a favela in Brazil. So I do believe in the power of young people, especially when we work to mobilize our people, our friends, people who are our neighbors. So I think this is really important. And Serene, she spoke about the importance of the just transition, leading ourselves before leading anything. Serene, this question got me. Lead yourself before leading anything. We need to be first leader of us. I think was amazing. And then in our second part of the panel, we had people speaking about the campaign. First, Juan, he spoke about some people don't have time to think in the future. Climate change is something that will impact our future, but we need to act right now because we are already suffering the impacts with the floods, with deforestation, with everything. So how can we develop these soft skills and the cultural relations to promote climate education? Then Firuza, she spoke that together we can create a global picture of the skills young people need to be part of a just transition. This was really impactful to me. And she spoke about the 4 pillars to
Amanda, we only have a minute.
Oh my God, I mean, just one minute, I'll end. She spoke about the local, regional, and national and global change that we are small bees and we are making change. And Shrika, she spoke one sentence that for me was that sentence. Be sure that unheard voice will be included. So thank you a lot for all our panelists. Thank you a lot for all our speakers, people who were here participating. It was amazing.
Thank you, Amanda. So I've just got a minute to say thank you very much. Amanda, being a brilliant co-host, really enjoyed sharing the session with you. The recording will be available later this week. So it will be on the Youth Connect Live page on the non-formal education website. Look out for the 3rd Youth Connect Live session, which will be held in next year, early spring. You will be contacted after the session with a feedback form, and the research link will be shared again. So I think all we've got to say is thank you for being with us for this past 90 minutes. It's been brilliant to have such a global online community supporting this very, very important work. And I think that question that focused on what do we need at COP29, which is coming up, is also now really fresh in our minds. So thank you to everybody, the panelists, the young researchers, and all of you. Goodbye.
We did, girl, on time. Thank you, everybody. And please don't forget to fill out the forms. Thank you.